Hello again. Keir Starmer's government has shown a great desire to indoctrinate children into believing whatever fashionable nonsense happens to be the flavour of the day for Guardian readers and intellectuals. The new taxation of private schools is one way that this is being done. Our present rulers dislike the idea that some children can still receive a good education, free of current obsessions with sexual identity, globalism, and so on. This is also behind the clampdown on academies, which will soon have to adhere to the national curriculum. This curriculum itself is, of course, being decolonised, as it is put, and brought up to date by distorting history and focusing more on ethnicity and gender than on simply relaying solid information and facts to the rising generation. The thing which really irks the Labour Party, though, is that tens of thousands of parents are at the moment able to sidestep all this very simply by not sending their children to school and just teaching them at home. In the eyes of people like those who make up the present government, nothing could be more alarming than the idea of many thousands of children growing up to be independent and free-thinking individuals. Why, it would be a threat to an orderly and well-run society. This is why in the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill, which is now working its way through Parliament, there is provision for cracking down on home education. This in itself tells us something about the nature of the present government. As a general rule, one can tell something about a nation by its attitude towards homeschooling, or home education as it is more generally known in Britain. Liberal democracies like Britain and the United States are usually okay with parents teaching their own children. It is a freedom, like freedom of speech and freedom of religion. In dictatorships, though, like Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia, the idea was very worrying to the authorities and the practice was illegal. In countries like those, children are seen as being the property of the state rather than the responsibility of the parents. Neither the Third Reich nor the communists of Eastern Europe were at all keen to see children being taught to think for themselves. So it is that for the whole of British history, there never has been any restriction on children being taught at home by their parents. Only now, with Keir Starmer's government, is such a measure being brought in. This has, of course, nothing at all to do with education as such. There is no evidence at all to suggest that home-educated children do any worse academically than those at school. It is rather about social control, making sure that children think along the same lines as the government. What's the point of decolonising the national curriculum if any parent can simply keep her child at home and teach her what she pleases? Madness. Teaching your own children or grandchildren at home is thus due to become an act of resistance against a domineering and power-hungry state. The hope of the government is that all private schools will eventually close and home education will be restricted increasingly until it's almost impossible for any parent to undertake it without the state dictating the nature of what is taught to children. The idea is that just as in totalitarian countries, the state will become the primary parent, responsible for the education of children, and the biological parents will be reduced to the status of part-time carers, answerable to the authorities as to what they are telling their children. Anybody who does not find this a terrifying prospect is probably either a Nazi or a socialist. For the rest of us, though, it's a chilling scenario because our children are the most precious thing in the world to us. If any viewers wish to undertake an act of resistance, then taking your child out of school and assuming full responsibility for them is one way of striking a blow at the dreadful idea of the nation's children becoming, in effect, the property of that nationalised industry known as the British educational system.